Hey, welcome back, parents. Listen, another awesome guest on our show for this episode. Another return guest, Pauline Meert. Listen, we have had her on the show twice already, and one of her episodes is the second most downloaded episode for our entire season. So, welcome back, Pauline.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to be back with you and to get to chat some more and just dig in. And thanks to everybody who's been listening. I really hope the content has been helpful to you. And if you ever have questions, never hesitate to reach out as well.
Yes, you are our go to person for all things child development. As the co founder of Sophia Montessori Academy and a certified Montessori teacher, you've got the corner on child development. So, the most popular episode that Pauline has done for us is episode 58, and it's titled Simple Four-Step Lessons That Will Decrease Frustration with your kids. This thing has been downloaded a ton of times, and parents are using the content in there to really teach their kids simple things with this four-step method that just save everybody from now nagging and yelling and meltdowns and tantrums. And it's really inspiring kids to have courage and confidence in their abilities to tie their shoes and to carry things with grace and to be courteous and to know how to look people in the eyes. So if you haven't seen it yet or heard it yet, episode 58 is a must listen. And also, if you have teens, I remember we talked about teenagers in that too, because actually that might have been the four planes of development episode.
It probably was. I got on a big soapbox about how awesome teenagers are. So be sure to.
Oh, yes. Okay, so listen to them both.
Yeah.
Episode 58 and episode 50, The Four Planes of Development. Okay, so today's episode is all about this idea of teaching our kids to share. And so I remember, Pauline, we were doing an episode, I was interviewing you, and right at the end of one of them, you mentioned something about oh, Jordan, I have this thing about parents teaching their kids to share and how that translates to kids later on. And so that was a total teaser, which I appreciate and love. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I wanted to just tell you, Pauline, that before we jumped on to record, I went to the Google and I did a quick search with the words, should we teach our kids to share? And then I did a search that was, should we teach our kids to share Montessori? And the answers were quite different. So I'm just going to read the answer that I got from just the generic, should we teach our kids to share?
Mhm.
Here's what the Google says. Children need to learn to share so they can make and keep friends, play cooperatively, take turns, negotiate, and cope with disappointment. Sharing teaches children about compromise and fairness. They learn that if we give a little to others, we can get some of what we want too. That was the number one answer. Any comments about that?
Yeah, no, I think some of the keywords are good of just cooperating and all of those things. I think it kind of misses the boat. It still sounds very selfish of just like I'm going to do this so I get something in return. And I think we can call children to a higher standard, and we can call ourselves to a higher standard than just doing something because we get something back. In a family of character, right? You want to have um, an approach that's founded on love and of supporting each other, not just because, well, if I do this, then I get ice cream from mom. That's not a deep sense of love, and that's not that meaningful, really. And
That's
it
right.
really creates a utilitarian use of, utilitarian approach to relationships. So I think while some of the keywords are good of, again, like collaboration, cooperating with each other, learning so many of those skills, those we can absolutely receive from learning to share. when it's presented, I would say in the Montessori way, but again, Montessori being a scientist first, really bases it on development, which is where we started talking about development with the 4 planes of development episode, and then also with um, when we talked about grace and courtesy, right? Those steps on how do we get to a place where we can get out the door without it being drama, right?
Yes.
So both of these episodes really help build the foundation for talking about how to teach sharing in a way that's not just if I do this, then I get this back, but just out of love for the other person and also out of self control and awareness of the individual.
Yes, absolutely. When you were talking, this phrase came to mind, and I'm sure I've said it to my kids in the past, but we kind of developed or latch on to these short phrases that we will just kind of bark out at our kids, especially in like a public setting or something, or you're at a play date with a friend and you're like, sharing is caring. Don't forget, sharing is caring. And I wonder if that even means anything to kids. What do you think about that? I mean,
Yeah, I think, it's so easy to get into habits of saying phrases like that, of like sharing is caring or, oh, good job. But what's the meaning there? And I think children start to tune us out when we just like say something over and over again, especially when there isn't the front loading that we offer through grace and courtesy. Through so I think we need to be careful as adults, be it with good job, be it with sharing is caring, be it with offer it up, be it with any phrases like that, to just like, oh yeah, because so often it just brushes things aside. It's like, well, no, you need to share because I said so and it's caring. But children need a lot more than that. Um,
no.
one of the things I kind of sharing is more of an adult virtue and an adult concept that children, particularly 0 to 6, need a lot more time to grasp and to understand because developmentally they're very, very selfish and very self-centered in the proper sense of the term, right? This is
Yes.
this is their time to construct who they are. Um, and because of that, they really don't have a lot of space for other people. And they're still, there's so much going on in their development that it takes time for them to understand that other people feel things differently, that other people are even separate from them. That's a very foreign concept, especially the younger the child is, especially, for example, for babies, and I even say this to parents actually for young children, they'll be like, oh, what did you do at school? And their 3-year-old will be like, I don't know, nothing. And often it's because to them, you know everything. You're mom and dad. You're not even separate from them. So why are you asking that?
Oh,
An
interesting.
interesting little nugget that I like to share with parents. But yeah, so I think there are lots of ways that we can teach sharing. But I think we have to be very careful of how we do it so that it allows for greater virtue and for them to understand virtue and to have self control. And so our expectations also need to be a little bit different.
Hmm.
Because some of the things I've noticed with, like being forced to share is it might lead to children just hoarding things. So they might hoard all their toys when somebody comes because they know that they're going to be forced to give it away and somebody else is going to take it from them is how they're going to view it. Even if you say sharing is caring, that's not how they're going to feel it. That's not how they're going to sense it. And then caring is just going to feel like something nasty instead of
Yeah.
something beautiful. Um, so that's one of the things I've seen is just hoarding. A little story I have is I had a new student to Montessori come around age 4, and within the Montessori classroom, we only have one of each material, one what we call works, and instead, and if one child wants to use what we call the ping tower or the knot cylinders, or do a clay work, for example, they have to wait until the person using it is finished. And so we established those grace and courtesy lessons that I shared a little bit about in that previous episode. And so the children know there's the expectation, there's one of everything, and they have as much time with that material as they want. Um, and it really works very naturally because as long as they know what the expectation is, they're fine with it. It might take a
Yes.
little bit of practice and things like that, but they know that, okay, when I get to work with the pink tower, I can do it as long as I want, and then I can put it back. So that's like the very basic foundation for sharing. First, they need to have this sense of security. Because if they start working with something and I interrupt their concentration, say, well, this other person needs it, you're kind of teaching the other person matters more than you. And what you're doing doesn't actually matter. So it's not going to be teaching something that's loving towards the other person. It almost sets you against the other person
Mm,
um, at this age group. And so when they know the routines, that's just how we function. And they know to, if they want to work with something, they might go up to a friend and be like, can you let me know when you're done? I'd love to do it. And then we also learned that when you finish a work, you make it look beautiful, you put it back on the shelf so it's ready for the next person. So you're preparing it, you're making it beautiful as a sign of love and care for the next person. And we're not
yes.
saying cleaning up is caring, it's just naturally a part of that. And they really get to experience that. So this student came and he definitely did not understand this concept. It was very, very hard for him. And I could see that he was coming from a place that where of sharing was caring was kind of the tagline. And whenever people came, over to his house, things were taken away from him to give to the other person. It was a very much forced approach to sharing.
Mm,
And so for a while, he just hoarded the materials. He didn't even want to do it. Like one of the works that he used to do a lot was the clay work. And he would just take it to his seat and he would just look at it, touch it a little bit, but then he was just like, I have it, no one else can have it. And I let him. I didn't force him. I gave him, I was like, you can use this work as long as you're done. When you're done, you can put it back on the shelf. And I taught the other children to, you're welcome to go up to him and say, please let me know when you're done. I'd love to have a turn. And when after, it took a while, after a few months, maybe a few weeks, of receiving this experience of his work being respected and his boundaries being respected, he started letting go. And he only used it a little bit. And then he started to really come into this rhythm of being able to use the work for as long as he needed, put it back for it to be ready for the next person. So that hoarding really started to disappear. And that's the foundation we need towards sharing. So
mm.
expecting a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old to share is not realistic because developmentally they're just not there. But being able to create an environment where boundaries are respected and then we can also set an example and build community and just there's so much more I can talk about each of these things. But anyway, any comments so far on this of just does that kind of track?
Oh, yes, that is totally tracking. First of all, I've been making a couple notes. One was just this idea of when your child is playing with something, and let's say you're having a play date, and another child comes over and wants what they have, and they're in the middle of kind of, you know, engaging with this toy or this work or whatever. Um, just what happens for the child when they get interrupted. There's
Mhm.
this concept that there's attention residue. Like it takes once you're focused on something and then you get interrupted
Yeah.
and asked to do something totally different, it takes 15 minutes for the brain to get back online and re-engage what you're doing. And so I think how many times have we interrupted our little kids and
Oh.
like, hey, you need to give that toy to him. It's already been 10 minutes, as if the clock dictates,
Mhm.
when you've had enough time with that. I think that's
Yeah.
another thing that popped up was like this time-based um, concept we have as parents where it's like, no, you get it for 10 minutes and they get it for 10 minutes. And
Mhm, mhm. And sometimes we need to have the patience to learn that it's okay to not have that skill yet, but how do we scaffold so that they can have this, intrinsic desire to share, and not just because we say so. And really quick, one of the hardest things is not everybody's gonna be on the same page as that. You're gonna go to a play date or you're gonna be with family and they're like, "Well, your kid's not sharing." Your kid's mean, and it's like, how do we also have the skills to explain that we're scaffolding, we're building towards that developmentally. My child's not ready for that, but this is why we're doing it this way, of being. So I hope this episode can help with that. I had another
absolutely.
thought as you were talking. We'll see if it comes back to me, but yeah, I think it's concentration, actually. I'm really glad you brought that up because that's so core to everything we do with Montessori. Because if a child is doing a work really beautifully, we're not going to go and say and interrupt them and say, "Oh, good job," because exactly that we don't want to break what is happening within the brain, um, and 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 it's hard because it's very counterintuitive to what we see in a lot of other childcare settings of just I have to entertain the child. I have to give, I have to give feedback, otherwise the child won't know. And I'm like, slow down. Let development happen. Give those skills, build it up, and let the brain like give them the space to do
Yes.
that.
Yes, I'm
Right.
smiling over here and about to laugh because I'm just busting myself. I'm going, this morning, my 12-year-old was making he made a sandwich and packed his little lunch for his enrichment program today. And I just opened up his lunch just on a whim. I never do this, but and he had his nice little sandwich packed in there. And I go, son, I am so proud of you for and he just interrupted me. He goes, Mom, making a sandwich does not deserve a compliment. He was so serious, like, we just kinda go overboard with this stuff, right? It's like,
Yeah.
good job," and it could just take him offline. I mean, he was making a beeline to the car, he had his stuff ready, and
Mhm.
I just felt like I needed to, throw him an extra compliment, and it's like, "Well, I'm 12." He kinda had to
I know how
get
to
me
do
to
this. Like,
regroup.
yeah,
Yes, like, "This
come
is
on.
no big deal, stop."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. I love that he was able to give you that feedback and that because of the family that you have and building a family of character, you're able to have those conversations with each other. I think that's also really, really beautiful.
Oh,
Um, yeah. So I think, I kind of want to make sure I also give some ideas of like what you can like practically do um, to teach sharing. So I think first of all is respecting the children when they are using certain toys, which is a lot easier said than done, especially if you have, let's say, a 9-month old and a 2-year old, right? Because the 9-month old is going to start crawling, start to grab the toys from the 2-year old. The 2-year old is going to have a fit, which is developmentally appropriate because they're like, I'm not finished with this. Or there's this desire to want what the other sees, but there isn't quite this awareness of the other person. So what do we do in that situation? So it's okay to have like, oh, this is your toy. You may play with that. This is your toy. You may play with that. And just say, oh, right now, 2-year-old sister is not ready to share that, and that's okay. And also for the 2-year-old sister to be able to feel the respected, is going to make it a lot easier in the future. And it's not going to be right in the moment. It's going to take time for her to be open to sharing, to be open to be like, oh, no, it's okay. You can have it, and to have that kind of just naturally come.
that does naturally come too. As you were
Yes.
saying that, I was just having just kind of these flashback moments of my own kids. It's like when you tell them they have to share, they rebel. But
Mhm.
when you help them use the words and give them the words they need to set proper boundaries so that they'll start saying this is their internal, monologue in the years to come, and you say, "Well, she's not done with that yet. She'll let you know when she is." That it's like, "Oh, now I might give it to you in, like, 2 minutes."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Like
think and I think giving those phrases of like, please let me know when you're done. And or when they're very little, being like, she'll let you know when she's done and you can have it then. And offering another option. The 9-month old is still gonna want a toy, but just giving something different to respect the 2-year old is gonna also allow them to not create this tension that's not necessary. Obviously a lot easier said than done, and parents feel free to email me if you're like, but it doesn't work. And I'm happy to chat with you just on how to go about it. um, and then I think you can also offer grace and courtesy lessons on what do you do when. So let's say, it's you're with the 2-year old and you're like, hey, when let's say when Mary really wants your toy, this is probably how you feel, right? Give them the and validate their feelings and give them the words for it. It probably
mhm.
feels really frustrating when your baby sister takes that away from you. Obviously, again, not in the moment. Do it at a different time. 9-month old is napping. Mary's napping,
Yeah.
and have that conversation of like, when that happens, you could either give it to her or you could say, no, thank you, and I'll help you. or whatever approach you want to have. But so that's one aspect of it. And as another aspect would be, cousins are coming over, and the expectation is that from the other side of the family is like, you have to share. So how do you prepare your children for that?
Yes.
And how do you set up your home for that? You say, when our cousins are going to come, they're probably going to ask for things to be shared. How do you want to go about it? What do you want to do? Use that time for your family meetings, kind of
Yes.
prepare for that, and just really set those expectations, and
Yes.
have that conversation with the cousins too, of like, oh, in our home, this is what we do. If you really want to use a toy, please do it this way. And your cousin's going to do the same for you too. So if you're using a toy that he really likes, he's still going to ask to let for you to let him know when you're done. So again, it goes back to those expectations and setting an example, and setting, yeah, exactly that, expectations, right? If
Yes.
they know what the expectations are, everything becomes a lot easier. And then instead of yelling, you can just reteach and remind, like, oh, we've already talked about this.
Yes.
Remember what we talked about? This is how we're going to do it.
Yes, I love that so much, and you're encouraging parents who are listening to have courage
Mm,
to speak up and kind of set the rules in a really sweet, kind, loving way the minute people come in their home, because that if you anticipate that's gonna be an issue, you can just say, "Hey, guys, I know you're gonna be playing together. We have a couple rules at our house, or here's kind of how we handle some things,
yeah.
and I know this is probably not gonna be an issue with you at all, but if it is, just, you know, you're welcome to come visit with us about it, but here's how we do toys," or whatever.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
I think so often as parents, we can feel like, "Oh, I don't know what that mom's gonna think of me if I
Oh,
say
for
that we
sure.
have these rules," right? And we're worried about pleasing people over helping to protect our kids' boundaries and really keep this same kind of rules and the environment the same for our kids so that they are nurtured in a way that they can grow and develop properly. I remember one time Lincoln had put together these beautiful Legos and several different ones, and he had them on a special shelf, and it was chaotic. There was lots of people around, and some kids got in his room and destroyed them. And I mean, he was heartbroken.
Absolutely.
And so afterwards, after the dust had settled, we had one of those conversations like you're talking about. We kind of front loaded the situation. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna have kids over again. They're probably gonna want to look at your Legos because they're really awesome.
Yeah.
How do you want to handle this so this doesn't happen again? Mom, can we put them on the top shelf? Absolutely.
There you
Put them
go.
on the top shelf. And then I helped give him those words, like you said, like, hey guys, stuff on the top shelf is not up for grabs, right? Those are his special Legos, and they're kind of for looking at and observing only.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
thank you for respecting our boundary. And you could tell just the anxiety just melted away from him like, someone's got my back here. This is important to me, you know?
Yeah. And then he can stand up for himself as well. Like, he can have those words for himself, and that's just a beautiful example to show, because then when he goes to one of those friends' houses, then he can be like, hey, what's off limits?
Yes.
He because it happens for me, I expect it to happen for you, versus like, oh, if I do this for you, then you're going to do that for me. If I like,
Yes.
the expectation of like, well, if you come into my house and I let you play with all my Legos, I'm going to go to your house and I'm going to play with all your Legos. Because that could be turned the other way around, right? You destroyed all my Legos, so I'm going to go to your house and destroy all your Legos.
Right.
We're greater than that. We're bigger than that, right? This is not the approach we want to teach our kids. This is not virtuous.
Yes.
And I think another aspect, that comes into sharing as well, is young children are not able to control their actions, right? They act out of impulse, especially before age 3. It's an impulse to learn, it's an impulse to grab. So to expect for them to be able to share is not realistic and is not gentle or respectful. So how do we, recognize that? Oh yeah, when you're 0 to 3, you're going to act out of impulse, but I can give you the tools to learn to control those impulses, versus controlling them for you.
Mm.
And young children really have a desire for control. They need control. That's how they make sense of their world. So how do we approach that? And it might be, when, oh, we're going to visit our cousins and they're going to have some really beautiful toys. And when you go in, you can choose two of them and say, "May I play with this or may I play with that?" Why not? And see what happens. And again, that's building a good human rapport of, even when you're 10, you should be able to say like, "Oh, I see those really cool toys. May I play with this or this?" So that kind of scaffolds and builds something for the future. And
Yes, I
I
love how you're saying just, like, you take something a thought or an idea, that
Mhm,
impulse, right? That young, kind of immature, impulse that is
mhm.
developmentally appropriate, and you put some space between the action, right?
Yeah.
By, "Hey, I've gotta ask," right? "I have to ask if this is okay."
Yeah,
And that's beautiful. I
yeah.
mean, we need more of that in our culture for
I mean, we
sure.
all need that reminder too of just, yeah, how to just be together. Yeah, so those are kind of my nuggets that I wanted to share about sharing. And I hope it's helpful of just remembering that something such as sharing also does need to be broken down by where the child is developmentally and the skills needed to come to a place of intrinsic loving sharing does need to take time, and it takes growth, and it takes checking our expectations as well.
Yes, thank you for giving us age appropriate expectations, because I don't think it's something that we think about often, actually, because you have one, two, three, four kids. You're just kind of, going at the speed of light. And what you heard 5 or 10 years ago, it may be in the back of your mind. And so you've gotten in some habits that aren't great. And so
Mhm.
I appreciate you kind of bringing us back gently to these, planes of development, and saying, hey, it's really not realistic to expect 0 to 3-year-olds to share. As a matter of fact, you're kind of interrupting their development when you demand that they do. They're not understanding. They're not at that age of reason where they could really grasp just your words about sharing their one coveted toy,
Mhm.
We need that. We really need to be kind of reoriented to what the proper expectations for our kids are, so that
Yeah.
we're not nagging and yelling and frustrated, and that they can grow in a
Yeah.
peaceful environment, you know?
Or again, just relying on phrases that we're used to saying. I was like, "Oh, sharing is caring, so let me take this away from you." And remembering that when children feel secure that things are not gonna be taken away from them, they're gonna become much more open to sharing naturally with others. Because, yeah, I mean, if somebody comes and things are taken away, that's very stressful.
Yes.
When there isn't that grasp of, oh yeah, others have have feelings too, right? We it takes that time to guide them towards, hey, right now you can see I'm feeling really sad or I'm feeling really angry, and this is what my body feels like, and or I can see you're really upset. We got to give them those words. Again, it's just that trajectory and taking the time to be within the development of the child, which is very different than the development of the adult. Uh,
Yes, you are so right about that, and the thing that I love about just everything that emanates from you is this idea of really fostering understanding in kids versus just like blind obedience. Like,
yeah.
do this because I told you to, do this because this is what we say in our house. It's like, let's really take some time, use those 4 steps of grace and courtesy, those 4 simple steps to teach your kids these lessons, um, right at the beginning. And then they will come to a deep understanding. And like you said, they will give from the charity of their own heart. They will be natural, givers and lovers. And that child looks very different from a child who has been told to do this because I said so.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think or just do this because then you get something in return, right? Just
Exactly.
that greater call to just a more virtuous life.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's more I could talk about, and I think, with obedience, I love that you talk about it. Montessori digs into the 3 levels of obedience of, at the very beginning for those, especially those 3 and under, obedience is the first level of obedience is I'm going to do it because it matches with what I want to do anyway. That's where they're going to be. It's like, oh yeah, it's a great idea for me to put my shoes there because it's a great experience that I want to try. Sure. That like that's the first level. Is like, yeah, I'm cool with that. That second level is there's a little bit more understanding of like, oh, I'm going to do this because you have authority over me and I know it's the right thing to do. And that's going to come 3 and up, right? It doesn't come before that.
Yes.
Rarely. And and then the third level of obedience is I'm going to do this because I love you. And I might even do it before you even ask me to.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's because of relationship. And so that's the kind of level of obedience we want to reach. And it's actually very, similar to, our relationship with God, right? Like we want to do things out of love for God and not get stuck in the second level of like, I'm just going to do it because you have authority over me. Like
Right.
that's an important
To the
part
rules.
of learning obedience, but that's not the higher level that we're called to. So another
Yes.
nugget to throw in there.
I love it, and you just kind of explained the scaffolding approach, right? Like, this
Exactly.
is 0 to 3, and so good. So, so good. Well, I would encourage as a parent of a child who's been through Montessori education, I would highly encourage if this message resonates with you that you strongly consider a Montessori education, a Montessori school, Montessori methods in your home.
Mhm.
It's just a beautiful way to get your kids started in these developmental stages of just wanting to do good and be good and just be virtuous little kids. I love it so much. So you can check out what Pauline has going on here in Denver at the Sophia Montessori Academy.com. Is that right?
Just sophiamontessori.com. Yeah.
sophiamontessori.com.
Yep.
And then you mentioned and offered if people have questions about this or they want to talk about their particular issue or dynamic with their child, they could email you. So what's
Absolutely.
your email address?
Yeah, you can email me info at sophiamontessori.com. So it's SOPHIAMONTESSORI. You can follow us on Facebook, on Instagram. We even have a Patreon now, so that I'm always happy to schedule with Patreon members. I can schedule some consultations and things like that to kind of get a chance to dig deeper into what's personally yours. um, and yeah, so that's kind of how you can get a hold of me. And yeah, I'm happy to be there as a resource, um, as much as possible, and just help you in your journey. And I think the beauty too of Montessori is because her philosophy is based on scientific observation, and not just whatever somebody thought of. um,
Google, the Google answer.
Not just Google, exactly. Um, a lot of what parents are doing, and like trust your instincts, trust yourself, and observe your child. And a lot of what Montessori has said and has done is going to really come to light, because she just took development, and that's what's called the Montessori method of just observing and really following what's
Yes, I
truly
love it.
yeah.
So awesome. So, so awesome. Listen, I just realized, when people throw out these ideas of like, yeah, check us out, check our Patreon out. I didn't even know how to get on a Patreon account. I was like, I feel embarrassed to ask this, but what? It's an app. Go to the App Store, download Patreon, Patreon. Download the app. Inside the app, you can search Sophia Montessori Academy and their channel will come up, and that's where you can engage them. You can see probably videos that you've done, right, Pauline? And
Hopefully soon. I'm
yeah,
technologically occasionally challenged, so it might take a little bit of time. And with this year has been our first year in the new building, so it's been a year of huge growth. But yeah,
yeah.
reach out through that platform directly through email, and we'll figure out what we need to do.
Awesome. Parents, kick those little phrases to the curb that may confuse your child. Sharing is caring and good job. And instead, really dig deep. Dig deep to learn more about their developmental stage and then meet them where they are with these 4-step grace and courtesy lessons, again, that were listed back in episode 58. Just take a little bit of time to explain things to them, give them the words they need that
Mhm.
they can use in the future to set healthy boundaries. And you will be shocked at how different it is when they are in a situation where someone's expecting them to share. You're going to be blown away.
One more quick tidbit, just since we're saying instead of saying good job, I want to make sure parents have an idea of what else to do instead of just make sure, like, oh, I noticed you did this, or tell me about this. So, kind of just switching out of those habits of just words that don't necessarily mean anything, that we're kind of just saying in passing because we feel like we have to. It's like, oh, hey, I noticed you said thank you. That's what we do, or
Yes.
tell me how that feels, or. So just a little something, so you're not just like, oh, I can't say good job. What do I do instead?
Exactly. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, expand on what you observed that you really liked.
Mhm.
Be specific with your language, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Pauline, thank you for coming back. I'm sure there's another episode in your future here on our show because you just keep bringing the golden nuggets. So, thank you. We appreciate you. We support what you're doing down there at Sophia Montessori Academy. So, um, give everybody our best, and we'll catch you on another episode.
And thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.